Okay, so good evening, folks that are in the Toby room in the library and folks that are joining us online. Thank you very much for attending our February Belmont Talks series. We're going to be talking about a very timely topic given world events this last week. We're going to talk about earthquakes in the Bay Area, and Tom Brocher, former director of Earthquake Science Center at USGS, will be giving us a presentation this evening. I also want to send a thank you to Susan Rendina, the city's, the Park and Recreation Department's volunteer coordinator. This Belmont Talk series has been Susan's brainchild, and she has presented us with over a year's worth of interesting topics to share with the greater Belmont community. And I heard we have somebody from Millbrae attending as well. So we welcome all listeners here, and we encourage the community to send us ideas for topics they would like to hear about. All these talks are recorded and available on the City of Belmont's Park and Rec Department volunteer page. You can actually find links to all of our previous talks. Next month, we're having another popular talk about from our master gardener. And in April, we'll be hearing from the Belmont Police Department about the dangers of fentanyl in our community. But tonight, let's talk about earthquakes. So without further ado, I will hand it off to Tom in the Toby room at the Belmont Library. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Bridget. When Susan asked me to give this presentation, we didn't know it would be quite as timely as it seems to be. As Bridget mentioned, I used to work at the USGS. I used to direct the Earthquake Science Center, which is one of two science centers within the USGS that deal with earthquakes. So we handle earthquakes in the West Coast primarily. I retired just before the pandemic, so I haven't given that many Zoom talks, but I'll try to do my best, and I appreciate the help that the folks here have given me. So we'll start with a slide that shows, it's a timeline that shows our earthquake history in the Bay Area since the start of the gold rush, 1850 at the left, and it goes to the present. And the dots are the earthquakes that have happened over time. The bigger the dot, the larger the magnitude. So you can see the biggest dot is that 1906. That's the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. That was a magnitude 7.8. That's the same size as the Turkey earthquake. So we'll see what that means in terms of damage area. Most of us who have lived in the Bay Area long enough got to experience the Loma Prieta earthquake in 1989. That was 10 times smaller. That was a 6.9. In just about 9 years ago now, we had a magnitude 6 earthquake in Napa. That was 10 times smaller than the Loma Prieta earthquake. The earthquake that most people don't know about, or we've all forgotten about, happened in 1868. That big dot with the 6.8 on it was the Hayward earthquake of 1868. And at the time it was called the Great San Francisco earthquake, but it got supplanted by the 1906 earthquake. But one thing I like to point out with this slide is, look at all the dots, look at all the earthquakes before 1906. And since then, relatively few earthquakes. That's because the 1906 earthquake was so big that it really cleaned out the system. And the stresses really got all cleaned out, and it's taking time to rebuild the stresses. So let's talk about the 1906 earthquake a little bit. Hold your question if you can. It might get answered coming up here. So this, the colors here show you the shaking intensity from the 1906 earthquake. And the black line shows you the part of the San Andreas Fault, which produced the earthquake, that actually broke during the earthquake. So it broke all the way down to San Juan Bautista in the south and all the way up north to Cape Mendocino. And all that area along the coast is very strongly shaken, lots of damage. Luckily, the only real population centers at the time were San Francisco and San Jose and Oakland. But this slide illustrates that the shaking will be regional. And this is the issue they're having in Turkey. You know, you're having damage as far as your eye can see. So the aid has to come in from a long way. The first responders probably might have to come from Sacramento or even Los Angeles. So it takes time to put that together. You know, that's why it takes, you know, at least 3 or 4 days to put a response to such a large earthquake. It just, the affected area is just so large that the help has to come a long way away. Now let's zoom a little bit more into the Bay Area. And so the faults, the earthquake faults are shown as red lines on here. And the big red line that runs down the peninsula, that's the San Andreas Fault. So that's our biggest hazard. And the thing that's kind of fun about this slide is that the areas in yellow show you where people lived back in 1906. So you can see that Belmont was not a very big place back in 1906. But the kind of gray or blue colors show you where we live now. Of course, now we live practically on top of the San Andreas Fault, but that wasn't really true back in 1906. So we have 10 times more people back than we did in 1906. So a lot more people in the Bay Area. The other thing to note on this slide is that star that you see, that orange star, that's where we think the epicenter was. It was about 2 miles offshore the San Francisco Zoo. And the earthquake broke to the south and it also broke to the north. I live in Millbrae, which was also very small at the time, but now we also have people that are living very close to the San Andreas Fault in Millbrae. I like to say, and the San Mateo County officials probably don't like it when I say it, but I say that San Mateo really owns the San Andreas Fault because it runs right down the middle of the county. And so it's going to impact pretty significantly the entire county because it runs right down the spine of the county. And the earthquake hazard in Belmont and Millbrae and San Mateo and every place along the peninsula is high because we just live so darn close to the San Andreas Fault. It's really, really close. It's so close that the shaking is just going to be really, really strong. There's no getting around it. So to help illustrate that, how we think the 1906 earthquake happened, and there's some, you know, this is a computer simulation. It's our best guess. It's not for sure what happened, but it's a pretty good guess of what we think happened. We're going to show you 4 snippets from a movie, and you can actually go to this website and get the actual movie and watch the movie if you want. You can watch other scenarios. We've done scenarios for earthquake on the Hayward Faults and different earthquakes on the San Andreas Fault. But this is what we think happened in 1906. Earthquakes start down 5 or 6 miles. And so it takes some time for the seismic waves to reach the surface. Not very long, only a couple of seconds. So this is showing starting around 3 seconds after the earthquake. And the shaking is just beginning to be sensed in San Francisco. You can see some color in San Francisco. If we go 3 seconds later, boom. This is how much of the ground is covered. And now all of San Francisco is shaking very strongly. Southern Marin County, it's made its almost way to San Mateo is shaking. 3 more seconds, boom. Now we've got Belmont shaking. We've got more of the Marin County. Again, the rupture is moving both to the south and to the north. Now, if we go step way ahead, 30 seconds, we've got the whole Bay Area engulfed and shaking. So there's it's not like you're going to be able to outrun this or anything. It's the whole Bay Area is going to be very strongly shaking in 30 seconds. Note the little pocket of red near Santa Rosa up to the north. It was noted that they had the most per capita damage during the earthquake, just because it's a sedimentary basin and it's very soft deposits that shake more strongly in earthquakes. So how do we anticipate earthquakes in the Bay Area? Well, we look at a number of things. We look at the earthquakes that we have. And on the right, on the left, is a map of the Bay Area, and you can see the Bay and Sacramento's off to the right-hand corner. All the little black dots, those are earthquakes. We have earthquakes every day in the Bay Area. Most of them we never feel. Too small to feel. But you can see that they form lineations. Those are the earthquake faults. And the one, you can see the one that's it's not that well defined on the San Mateo Peninsula, but you can see the big blue dot in the Santa Cruz Mountains. That was a 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. But you can see the San Andreas Fault. If you move to the East Bay, you can very clearly see the Hayward Fault. And then you can see some faults in the East Bay. We also look at the timing of the earthquakes, both in historically, and we dig trenches across faults, and we get samples of disturbed soil, and we date those with the radiocarbon methods to look for prehistoric earthquakes. We look at the rates that the ground is moving. We cement GPS receivers to the ground, and we watch them move over time. So there's a variety of things that we do to come up with our estimates of the hazard. So the hazard map is on the right, and now the big colored lines, those are the main earthquake faults in the Bay Area. And the red line is the San Andreas Fault running up the San Mateo County. The green line offshore, that's the San Gregorio Fault that runs right up the coast. The Hayward Fault is sort of the orange line. And then there's some big faults in the East Bay in blue. If we look at the San Andreas Fault, in the next 30 years or so, we anticipate something like a 22% chance of a damaging earthquake on the San Andreas Fault. That would be a magnitude 6.7 or bigger. That's about the magnitude of the Loma Prieta earthquake. Yeah.
But is it possible to say where along the fault you think it might rupture?
No, not really. Not really.
So it's fairly well locked right now.
Yeah, it's a locked fault.
Okay, the Loma Prieta, was that on the San Andreas or something?
We think it was on the San Andreas fault, or I think it was on the San Andreas fault.
And was there any release of stress on the San Andreas from the Loma Prieta?
There was some,
Then,
but it didn't last long.
And then it's interesting where the word half of the day is there's placidity of earthquake activity to the what I'll call.
Yeah, that's because the fault is locked.
I'm sorry?
That's because the fault is locked.
There's one.
But if I could ask you to hold some of your questions, then I can get through the talk. But the highest hazard of any particular fault in the Bay Area is on the Hayward Fault, because the last big earthquake on the Hayward Fault was, as I said, back in 1868. So it's been over 150 years. So we are well in the window of when we could expect an earthquake on the Hayward Fault. We look at all the faults in the Bay Area together, something like 72% chance of an earthquake in the Bay Area, as defined by this region shown on the map. So fairly high likelihood that in the next 30 years, there will be a damaging earthquake in the Bay Area. Let's zoom in a little bit on Belmont. And this is from an older publication, 2006 USGS report. It's a map that shows liquefaction hazard in the Bay Area. So the red is the highest liquefaction area, then yellow, then orange. There isn't much orange. Then moderate is yellow, and green is low, and then gray is very, very low hazard. So the orient view, the big blue line is the San Andreas Fault. The Highway 101 Bayshore Freeway runs up along the former shore of the bay. That's why it's called Bayshore. So most of the red shown on this map is landfill. That's the way it's mapped red. Some landfill is better than others. Depends on when it was done. So everything east of 101 is basically fairly high liquefaction hazard. Everything between 101 and 2, El Camino. My label for El Camino doesn't show on the map, but it's that next green line to the left of 101. So between 101 and El Camino, there are some younger deposits, stream deposits and so on. And these have some chance of liquefying during an earthquake. To the west of El Camino, it's pretty good in terms of liquefaction hazard. But the other hazard that's not shown on here is in the steeper parts, as you go up towards 280, you have more of a landslide hazard. So those areas some of them may have experienced some landslide issues. So your hazard is really strongly dependent on where you are, what the geology is at the surface, the age of the deposits, whether it's bedrock or soil. That has a strong impact on how strongly your immediate area will shake. Okay, this is a further zoom in, and so you can get a little better view of the conditions near Belmont. And you can see one of the issues that we have is that both 101 and 92, large parts of it are on liquefiable material. So some of those, there may be some issues along parts of those freeways after the earthquake. I think I've said, again, if you want to know where the San Andreas Fault is, it basically runs right down the reservoirs, Crystal Springs and San Andreas reservoirs, and just west of 280. What we learned, one of the things we learned from the earthquake, the magnitude 6 in Napa, which, although from a seismologist viewpoint, a magnitude 6 is a fairly small earthquake, but it's a damaging earthquake. It certainly damaged the heck out of Napa. But this shows you two different photos that were taken of the same road with a line, lane line that painted down the middle of the road. So one photo on the left was taken the day of the earthquake, and the photo on the right was taken the next day. And you can see the difference in the offset of that painted line over a day. So what's happening is that without causing large earthquakes, the ground kept moving. And in fact, in parts of the fault, the Napa fault that caused the earthquake, kept moving for months. after the earthquake. So if we think of about, instead of a painted line, if we have a pipeline in the ground, the first day of the earthquake, that pipeline is offset maybe an inch or two, maybe it's strong enough to still be okay. But if we now over time, if we pull that pipe farther and farther apart, it may fail. So there may be progressive failure of gas pipelines, water pipelines, sewage lines. So this is something that we'll have to pay attention to after a Bay Area earthquake. Okay, so that's I summarize in a nutshell sort of the hazards part. I want to focus on what we can do to protect ourselves and minimize the chance that we'll be injured during earthquakes and property damage to our homes and so on. So the first thing to know is that in California, because we have very good building codes, our building codes are designed so that buildings don't collapse. The way people get hurt in earthquakes is that the shaking is so strong that they lose their balance. They tip over. You fall down. And so people get hurt, you know, they land on their hip. They try to break their fall and they'll break their wrist or hurt their shoulder. So you don't want that to happen. The other way people get hurt is that they, as soon as the shaking starts, things will start to fall. Things will come off the ceiling, things will come off the wall. So you need to find some cover. Protect your head and your torso. So when the shaking starts, things aren't falling on your, critically important parts of your body. So this mantra, all the kids in school learn this every year. They go through this drill. As we get older, we don't hear this every year. We forget about it. So the first thing you do is you drop to the floor very carefully so that you're not pushed down. Okay, so now you're on the floor. I'm on the floor. And I want to get myself some cover. So I just find a chair or a table, something that's going to help protect me. And I want to get under that and I want to hold on to that. Because what happened in 1906 is that people reported that the furniture went round and round and round their room for about 45 seconds. It was about 45 seconds of strong shaking. So you don't want your chair that's protecting you over in the other corner of the room. It's like, that's not going to help you very much. So you want to hold on to that. Okay, so it's drop, cover, hold. Okay. One thing I want you not to do is try to run anywhere, especially out of the building. That's how you're going to get killed. Okay. That's where the fatalities in California happen. People try to leave the building, bam, something falls off the building and hits you. You're much safer staying in the building, getting some cover. The other thing, remember, this is strong shaking. This is like you're in the middle of the ocean and big waves. It's going to be very hard to walk, let alone run. Okay, it's not easy to move anywhere. So you want to get on the floor and then find the nearest place that's going to give you cover. And you've only got a few seconds to do this. It's not like you have a lot of time. Another thing I want to go over, since Belmont has a lot of homeowners, maybe some older homes. In the older homes and in much of California, property is expensive, so we put our garages underneath our house, especially if the lot is sloping or on the hillside. So the structural engineers call this house over garage or residence over garage. And this is actually a house in Burlingame, but it's an older house. If your house is, or your property is built 1985 or later, it's building code probably pretty good. Dates back to that time. Before that, it probably wouldn't be the, meet the current building code. So if you have an older house, and you've got a house like this, and let me describe this house a little more. So it's basically a one-story house, but it's got these stairs you walk up to the first floor. So it's got a little crawl space underneath the first floor. And then you've got a garage. So unless that wall that's beneath the big picture window is really strong between it and the foundation, it can fail in an earthquake. And so then you got problems. What kind of problems do you have? Well, you're not going to be able to live there. You're going to be red tagged. And so you're going to have to find another place to live. And you might, well, here's an example of what did happen in 1989. This was a house in the Santa Cruz Mountains, pretty close to the epicenter. So it's a pretty modern looking house. It's probably built in the 70s. But look at the first floor. It had a two-car garage, one-car garage, and a door. So that first floor had very little structural framing. It was almost all open space. So when the shearing went side to side from the earthquake, there wasn't enough resistance in the building. And it just got pushed to the left and it kept going. Couldn't come back. And the only thing that's holding up this house now is a car that's underneath it in a garage. So this, you got real problems now. One of the problems you have is that your gas is probably severed. Your gas main is probably severed. So you probably have a gas leak and you have life safety issues in your house. So you've got to evacuate right away. And you got to, if you can, turn off the gas. But again, you're going to be red tagged. You're not living in that house. It's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to repair it. Probably, 400,000 or 500,000 to repair. So you're looking at a major expense. So what can you do? Well, you can go underneath your house in the crawl space, and you can make it the first board that's right above the foundation, the horizontal board. You want to make sure there's lots and lots of bolts in there. So it's really well bolted. So it doesn't, your house can literally fly off the foundation in a big earthquake. So if it's not bolted, you got problems. So you want to make sure the house is really well bolted. And then after it's really well bolted, then you go in and you nail sheets of plywood to any two by four, vertical 2x4 that you can see. And you nail not only the vertical 2x4s, but all the horizontal ones. So that plywood is attached to every piece of wood in the framing, and it helps keep those pieces together so they don't want to move side to side. So that's called bolt and brace. It's not that expensive to do this on a house, maybe $10,000. Much less expensive than repairing your house. And you'll have a place to live after the earthquake. You won't have to move somewhere. And you can get some help from the California Earthquake Authority. They have a program called Earthquake, Brace, and Bolt. And you can type in your zip code and see if they're taking applications. They take a number of applications and then they shut down their applications, and then they process all those and have all those houses repaired, and then they take more. But you can sign up to receive an update for when they are accepting applications in Belmont or the area. And they'll give you, I think, up to about $3,000 for the retrofit. So in some of the, less involved retrofits, that may pay for more than half of the cost. So it's definitely worth looking into. Again, the California Earthquake Authority, earthquake brace and bolt is what you want to look at. The website is also very good for, it tells you, it's got this homeowner resources. It's got information about what's involved with this brace and bolt, how you do it, the kinds of materials you would need. And I think it might, I'm not 100%, but it might have information about contractors that you can contact and get quotes from and that sort of thing. Why am I pushing this so much? Because we know it works. And here's a case study. So this couple as an investment bought 2 identical houses in Santa Cruz. Same year of construction, same builder, same materials, yada, yada, yada. Everything's the same. They had finished retrofitting one house. We're going to start work on the other house, and then boom, the Loma Prieta earthquake hits. So this house that had been retrofitted, really great, very little damage, very minor damage. The other house was really in bad shape after the earthquake. Like hundreds of thousands of dollars of repair costs. So we know that retrofitting even of these older houses can really help. So that's just something we know for sure. So if you can spend your money on earthquake insurance, or you can retrofit or do both, but retrofitting works. We know that. The other thing I want people in Belmont to know is that it's pretty likely that chimneys were going to be damaged by this earthquake on the San Andreas Fault. And these show you some chimney damage from earthquakes in Northern California. But I went up to Napa shortly after their earthquake and saw a lot of damaged chimneys up there. And it's chimneys and earthquakes don't mix very well. We call this unreinforced masonry, and it's just they don't fare well in earthquakes. And you can, at the top of the chimney, can kind of fall apart and land on your roof, or you can get on the right, you can get cracking of the big fractions of the chimney. I've seen entire chimneys fall down, maybe into your neighbor or over your car or whatever's in your driveway. So let's see. Yeah, so unless you really use your chimney a lot, which is probably not a good idea with climate change, unless you might think about replacing it with something that's not made out of brick. And you can replace it with like a metal pipe and surround that with wood framing. And that's not going to go anywhere in an earthquake. It's not going to cause any damage. And you can, if you like the look of brick, you can have fake brick put on the outside. But these days, I don't know, not that many people seem to use their chimneys, fireplaces anymore. So my take is, why have something that could potentially hurt you kicking around your house especially if you're not using it? And the reason to do it before an earthquake is that after an earthquake, how many thousands of people are going to need their chimney fixed? Okay. So you can take a number and you can pay 10 times more, because the person who's going to repair your chimney can ask for whatever they want to. And you'll be happy to pay it because you want to fix your chimney. So having it done before the earthquake, you probably save a lot more money, and you can do it at your convenience. Here's more examples of why masonry is not a good idea in earthquake country. These are all snapshots of some of the older buildings in Napa. Again, this is only a magnitude 6. So this is 100 times smaller than the 1906 earthquake. 100 times smaller. And look at this building to unreinforced masonry. What tends to happen is that the waves get amplified the farther they go up the building. So you see the damage at the top floors. And there's amplification on the corners of buildings. So that's very typical damage pattern. But this is a reason why the building code doesn't allow for this kind of construction. It hasn't allowed for this kind of construction in a long time. So you mainly will see this in older parts of town, the old, the old shopping business district and that sort of thing. The other thing I want you to know is that in terms of protecting yourself, is that we now have something we call earthquake early warning. It's live and online. It's available to you right now. And what it is that it's a system based on the fact that earthquakes send out two kinds of waves. There's a fast wave, which isn't, the shaking isn't that large. And then there's a slower wave where the shaking is much larger. That's the damaging wave. So the earthquake, say in the schematic, happens down in the earth on a fault at the epicenter, and it sends out these waves. If we have enough sensors, I think of them like tripwires. If we have enough sensors underground, we can detect the earthquake, locate the earthquake, and estimate the magnitude before the strong shaking gets to us. And so we can do all that and then send a warning out in advance of the damaging waves. You're not going to get days of warning. You're not, as I showed you in that slide, you're going to get seconds of warning, okay? 5, 6, 7, maybe 10, 15, depending on where the earthquake is. You're not going to be able to do anything except you'll be able to do a really good job of protecting yourself. Where would be a good spot for me to be in 5 seconds? Okay, maybe I should be farther away from the windows. Maybe I should be away from the big heavy thing that's hanging from the ceiling. You'll have some time to think about it and go there. Now, talking about drop, cover, and hold, I forgot to mention, there's a good chance the earthquake will happen at night. I think the Turkish earthquake was at night. Maybe I'm wrong, but we spend a lot of time in our beds. If you're in bed, just stay there. Take the pillow, put it over your head. Make sure there's nothing heavy hanging over your bed. Not a good place for a big, heavy picture frame that's going to fall off and hit you when you're in bed. Just stay in bed, protect yourself. If you're in the car, it's going to feel like you've got a flat tire. Most people who are driving during the Loma Prieta earthquake say, oh, I felt like I had a flat tire. So you do the same thing. You pull over very slowly, carefully to the side stop. Try not to stop underneath an overpass or power line or something like that. If you're outside, just look around, see what can fall. Try to keep an eye on that. Move away from it, maybe. So it depends where you are. So anyway, the earthquake early warning can help you, give you extra time. Say we had an earthquake in Berkeley. We would get about 7 or 8 seconds of warning in Belmont, which again is, enough time to help protect yourself. But note that there's this red area right at Berkeley. That's because of the way this works. The earthquake has started. It's not like in advance of the earthquake. We don't know this is an earthquake until it started. So very close to the epicenter of the earthquake, there's not enough difference in time between the weak wave in front and the damaging wave behind it. Those are so close together, there's not much warning time. So if you're right on top of the epicenter, sorry, you don't get any epicenter. You don't get any warning time. The earthquake is your warning. But you still do drop, cover, and hold. So the program is called MyShake. And if you buy an Android phone, it'll be loaded on the Android phone. You don't have to download. If you have an Apple phone, you have to download it from Apple Store. And you can customize it. I only want to know about earthquakes in California above a certain magnitude. Because if you set it too low, you'll be beeped for everything, including things that are barely even feel. So it's not much point. So again, MyShake is what you would download. Now, because earthquakes, there's no scientific basis for predicting earthquakes. So no seismologist is ever going to say, hey, you know, Sue, if I were you, I'd go up to Tahoe this weekend, you know, between you and me. That's not going to happen. So this is a no notice event. So you got to be prepared ahead of time. So there's 4 steps shown on here. One is securing your space, making sure that these days, most everyone's water heaters are well secured. But if you've got tall furniture that could topple over during an earthquake, think about attaching it to the wall, putting it, make sure it's connected to a stud somehow in the wall. Having a family plan, how you're going to reconnect with your family. Texting is probably a good way to go. Having a meeting place. Oh, let's meet at this place. And if that place is no good because something bad happened there, plan B is to meet here or whatever. Have your kit. You need to have your kit ready, and we'll talk more about that. And then, you know, minimize your chances for damage to your property by doing this, retrofitting your home and putting together your papers, you know, scanning, you know, a lot of people scan their documents so they have it on a memory stick or something. Put that memory stick in their emergency kits. If you need to go, you throw it in your kit. You've got your PDFs of your important papers. So what's in your kit? So you can buy a lot of kits off the shelf, and you know, it's water. The main thing is, I want to emphasize water, 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 because our water comes from the Sierras. And I showed that map with all the earthquake faults in the East Bay, where our water supply crosses 3 active earthquake faults to get to us. So we could have a big earthquake in the East Bay, east of the Hayward Fault, that doesn't do much to us. It's like, oh, you know, no big deal. But it has impacted our water supply line. You know, luckily we have reservoirs up the hill, but you know, that's not to say that the water pipes don't get damaged somewhere. So water, and as we said, this is a big earthquake, so you know, help isn't coming for a few days. So they say at least 3 or 4 days, maybe more like a week. Enough water. That's 1 gallon of water per person per day. You're going to want your prescription medications. They're not going to, no one else is going to have your prescription meds. They're not going to have them. If you have to evacuate, they're not going to have them at a shelter. So you need your whatever prescription medications you have for your children or for your parents or whomever you take care of, your pets. Think about, you know, you've got to think about everyone who's in your life and who you take care of and that sort of thing. Here's the handy tip. It doesn't cost anything. Again, we talked about how the furniture goes round and round the room. Well, your bed isn't going to wind up where it was probably, especially if it's on wheels. And glass may break. Your pictures may come down and break. Picture frames may come down. Your windows might break. You step out of your bed without looking, there may be broken glass. First thing you do is cut your feet. So this person has put a pair of shoes and a flashlight in a plastic bag and tied it to their bed. So no matter where their bed is, they're going to be able to get a hold of some shoes and a flashlight so they can look around and make sure that they don't get hurt the first thing they do step out of bed. So I'm sure everyone has an extra pair of shoes you can put underneath your bed. And here's another big not to do, don't hang heavy things where you sleep, where you work, where you hang out. If you're a couch surfer, don't have anything over your sofa or whatever. Because the first thing that's going to happen in your earthquake, it's going to fall off the wall and hit you in the head. And you're going to be injured from the get-go before the earthquake's even over. So you want to make sure, like over my bed, I just have like a Navajo blanket or something. So it's not going to fall off and hit me and hurt me. Or just something light, so that if it falls off, it doesn't hurt. We used to, before the Loma Prieta earthquake, we used to tell people, after the earthquake, turn off your gas, turn off. Well, everyone did that. But here's the thing, PG&E wants to turn your gas back on. They don't want you turning your gas back on. So if you shut off your gas, you're going to be waiting for PG&E to come around to turn your gas back on. Well, that took about 3 weeks for some people back in '89. So we tell people now, if you know you have a problem, if you can smell gas in the house, if you can hear it leaking behind the wall, okay, you've got a gas problem, turn off your gas, okay? But if you don't think you have a problem, leave it on, because it's going to be really nice to be able to boil some water, take a hot shower, and all that kind of good stuff. You're going to want some hot water if you can get it. Okay, the other thing PG&E is going to do is they're going to shut off the electricity, whether they need to or not, because they don't want any downed electric lines starting gas fires. So what's going to happen? Well, your gas station is not going to be able to pump you any gas. So if you're sitting on empty, good luck getting gas. It ain't going to happen. So I always keep a half a tank of gas in my car. So I know I have gas in case there's an earthquake. And I don't have to worry about the power being out and not having any gas. The other thing you can do, and this is also free, is you can take what's called a Citizen Emergency Response Team training, that's CERT for short, and all the peninsula cities have them. And it's about a 20-hour course, and it's a FEMA directed course. And you learn things like how you put out small fires, how you do medical triage, figure out who needs help the most and fastest, how you do some emergency first aid, how you search a building to make sure there's no one in there that needs help. And all that, again, this is good to know for yourself, because, if this earthquake happens at night, power is out, how do you search a building to make sure you've covered the entire room and made sure that everyone's identified? How do you do that in the dark? And you learn that kind of thing. So I think that may be the end. Yeah, so I think the take-home message is that we're in earthquake country. We live with the San Andreas Fault is our good friend, our near neighbor, just up the hill. We have a history of earthquakes in the Bay Area, but there are definitely things we can do to mitigate earthquake damage and reduce our chances of being hurt in the earthquake, and in our house being much more likely that we can live in it after the earthquake. So I'd be happy to try and answer any of all of your questions. If you have any.
Franciscan complex and its susceptibility to home damage in the shaker.
Okay, so the question was about a particular rock that we have in the Bay Area. It's called Franciscan complex. Just, it's a sedimentary rock that's been formed out when we used to have subduction off the coast of California. One Pacific plate used to go under, Farallon plate used to go underneath California, and it's been uplifted, metamorphosed and uplifted. It's pretty much what we have for bedrock in our part of the Bay Area, and it's definitely much better than soft soils. So there are a lot of places in San Francisco that in 1906, the old houses there that were on bedrock. The people that lived in Nob Hill in San Francisco in 1906, they felt the earthquake. They got up, they looked around, went back to bed. It's like, there's no story here. The people that lived sort of in the China Basin area where they near the ballpark, all that stuff. They had liquefaction, houses sank partly into the soil. They had a lot of damage. It was a much different story than the people that lived on bedrock. Really the tale of two cities.
Hi there, this is Bridget. I've got
Yeah.
a question from one of our online attendees. I live in a 10-story owner-occupied condo building built in the early 60s, and it has a soft structure, i.e. underground garage. Is this type of building significantly at risk? Can anything be done to make it structurally safer? It's primarily concrete and we are on a hill.
Okay, so I'm hearing that it's a 1960s 10-story concrete building. Yes, you know, all buildings can be retrofit. It wouldn't qualify for the current earthquake bolt and brace. The issues are more substantial with a 10-story building, but definitely there can be things done to strengthen the building. One thing that's maybe helpful is that it's on the hill and it may be possibly on bedrock. That would be good. You can hire a structural engineer to come in and take a look and give you some recommendations. I guess that would be my recommendation, is that the HOA think about hiring a structural engineer to come in and make an assessment.
Are there requirements for buildings of certain age to be assessed and retrofitted?
There are in some communities. San Francisco had a program that required that house I showed in the Santa Cruz Mountains that collapsed. That's called, the engineers call that a soft story house. The first floor is not very strong, so they call it a soft story. They required soft story buildings that I think were 3 or more stories and had 5 or more living units in it to be retrofit. That was mandated by law in San Francisco. And I think maybe San Carlos is, and maybe Berkeley. A few of the Bay Area communities are mandating that kind of structure. I'm not sure. This is a place in Belmont, I'm guessing.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Let's assume it is, yeah.
Yeah, you would check, I guess you would check with the building department, the city building department, and see if there's any requirements. Probably not. But it's something that the HOA may want to do voluntarily.
Yeah. Okay.
Get ahead of the curve. Yeah.
In the old days, anyway, when I lived in LA, they would tell us to stand in.
Okay, so back in the old days, back in the days when they made brick masonry buildings like I showed in Napa, the only framing in the building was around the windows and the doors. So those perhaps were a little bit stronger, but in modern buildings, there's no advantage at all with doorways. And in fact, there's a hazard because the doors can flap. And if you're not careful, you're looking the other way and the door collapses in your hand and smashes your hand. So it's probably better if there's absolutely, if you're in a room and there's not a stick of furniture or anything, it's like an empty room, you just get against the wall and cover your head with your arms. Like that. You're just trying to give your head as much and your upper torso as much protection from things falling as you can. You just do your best. You know, it's not going to be perfect, but you do what you can with the amount of time that you have.
So
More
if our,
questions about, go ahead.
yeah, if our online folks, if you want to type a question into the Q&A section, you're welcome to do that. I'm kind of monitoring that. And while we're waiting for that, I just want to also give a sort of second year plug for participating in the CERT program in your community. I did that a few years ago in my neighborhood, and it's actually very helpful in understanding how to be useful in any kind of an emergency, how to take, look in on your neighbors, maybe if you have some elderly neighbors, and how to safely check on them and assist and quickly help, your community assess its situation, because we cannot expect that first responders will be able to come to our community for several days, and we have to prepare for that and be able to help triage. It was really a useful series of lectures and education and some simulations and that sort of thing. So it was really good.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a CERT member in Millbrae and help teach classes every year.
Mhm.
I agree. And I've talked to fire chiefs, and I'll ask them, well, tell me about your standards of care, Well, 911, we've got somebody at your house in 3 or 4 minutes, that's their standard. But I asked them, well, what about after an earthquake? Yeah, it's the same standard, but it's 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
Not minutes.
Yeah.
So we are literally on our own for 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
I talked to the guys, firemen who responded in Santa Cruz. There was a lot of damage in Santa Cruz from the Loma Prieta earthquake. And they said, we basically, if you called 911 and you were asking for medical help, they couldn't help you.
Yeah.
They were too busy fighting fires.
Yep.
They had because it takes 10, 15 firemen and women to fight one fire.
Yeah.
So if you've got 2 ignitions, that's probably all the fire people that you have in your city.
Yeah.
So we are on our own. So as much as we can do to help ourselves, better off we're going to be. Susan.
We had them talk last year here.
Okay.
And so if you go online to the store talk, you can see a talk from certain people.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got another question here online. Do you recommend that high density, high rise buildings store common supplies like water, food, etc.? That's question 1. Question 2, is CERT going to be offered for Belmont residents? I'll answer question 2. I think the answer is yes. Take a look at recent City of Belmont weekly newsletters. You can go to belmont.gov, and on the homepage you can find those. And
that's CERT is usually managed through the fire department. So
but I think the City of Belmont might be publicizing those as well.
Okay,
or that's a good point. Or go to the SMC Fire. That's the San Mateo Consolidated Fire Department.
Yeah.
Belmont is part of that. Belmont, San Mateo, and Foster City have a sort of a mutual aid joint use.
A community kind of emergency supply depot isn't a bad idea, but you have needs that are unique to you. Your prescription medications, your important documents, So you're gonna want, and you're probably gonna want some things in your unit, a flashlight, so you can get around within your unit and the whole building in case it's dark. So I think a communal thing is fine for some things, but it doesn't get around the need to have some of your own supplies, I think.
There's also a good recommendation to have a pair of shoes, just like you have a pair of shoes under your bed. It's a good idea to have an extra pair of shoes in your car and some water in your car,
Well, that's a good point. Some people ask, well, where do I keep the emergency kit? If you're working, you're driving to work every day, I would put it in my car. Because then I have it at work, I have it at home, wherever I am with the car, I have my kit.
Right.
So that's a good place. If you're, I'm not working, I don't commute. So, having it at home is the best place for
Right.
me, because that's where I spend most of my time.
Right. But let me just go back to CERT for 1 second. If you just
Yeah.
Google CERT in San Mateo County, you don't have to go to the CERT in your own town. You can go to one of the programs that's offered elsewhere
Yeah.
in the county. You're welcome anywhere, and just take a look. Different communities are offering them at different times, and the more people that go through that program, the better off we will all be.
Yeah, at a minimum, you'll be able to help out, in your own house.
Right.
You'll be able to help. If somebody gets hurt in your house, you'll be able
Right.
to help them.
Right. That's actually a really good point, that just going through the CERT program and becoming CERT certified does not obligate you to step up in an emergency or anything like that. They actually.
Well, until yeah, that's true. But, hopefully you can stabilize your situation at home pretty quickly, and then you'd be free to help out.
Of course. Yeah. Great. Great. I don't think we have any other questions online. So I think we're all set here. Thank you so much, Tom, and for sharing this with us again, with the tragedy in Turkey and Syria right now.
Yeah.
It's an unfortunate but healthy reminder for all of us to just, maybe just, this week do 1 or 2 things to get a little bit better prepared, whether that's putting your documents on a memory stick. That's a great suggestion. Or getting some more water and an extra pair of shoes. Every little bit we do is good for all of us. So thank you so much for reminding us how to keep ourselves safe. And thank you, Susan, for putting this together.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to end the recording.